Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Utah County Republican Party podcast. That's always a mouthful. We need to come up with a shorter way of saying that. But yeah, we're the official podcast. I'm Charles Max Wood. I'm the vice chair of the party. We're here with Cristy, the chair of the party. And we're also here with Phil Lyman and Natalie Clawson, who were gubernatorial candidates for governor and lieutenant governor. So welcome, Phil and Natalie.
It's good to be with you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, excited to get in and talk about this stuff. And I have to say, I still sometimes get questions just from my neighbors who weren't even delegates or anything. It's just so what is the deal with all this stuff? So hopefully we can clarify some of the misconceptions and give people an idea of what's actually going on. I think where we want to start is with your Supreme Court case. And maybe I'll just turn it over to you and you can explain what the case is, what you guys are doing there and what you're hoping to accomplish.
Yeah. So I had filed a case with the Utah Supreme Court that they rejected without a hearing, which opened up the door for us to go to the U.S. Supreme Court, which we did, filed a case. And what it is, as I understand, and Natalie, if I'm explaining any of this wrong, just jump in. But it's going to what they call a conference, and it'll be a 9-judge panel at the conference. It's a question. We ask the question, and they will answer the question. The question is, does a political party under First Amendment right of association have the right to choose its candidate without interference from the legislature? And it leans heavily on a case, New York Board of Education versus Torres Lopez, where they said essentially that political parties are not bound by state legislation that tries to interfere with their right to choose their candidate. So that'll go on the 10th of January. They'll take that in conference, and depending on what their answer is, they could take an action. They could say the primary election was mishandled, or it was a fraud in Utah, and they need to redo it, or that more likely they'd kick it back to a Utah court to remedy the question. Or they could say it looks like the GOP and the state are not in conflict with each other. They seem to agree that the legislature should be able to install candidates, and would be the worst case scenario for us, is that they come back and say, yeah, there's really no conflict between the GOP and the legislature. On that line, I had hoped, and I asked the state GOP if they would join the lawsuit as a plaintiff, and when they said they couldn't do that, then we really had no alternative but to include them as a defendant. So to me it's a weaker position when you've got the basically the lieutenant governor and the GOP as defendants, when what we're saying is there's a conflict between the two of them, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think our delegates and people who have been involved with the party, they've kind of followed along with the signature path, and that's where you're talking about where the legislature has interfered with the party's ability to choose its own nominees for the general election. Yeah.
Just as we were getting started here, I thought I'll just throw this up on Grok on AI and ask, and I said, does that Utah SB 54 force a GOP convention winner to participate in a primary? And the answer from that says Utah Senate the bill SB 54 does not directly force a GOP convention winner to participate in a primary election. Instead, it provides an alternate pathway for candidates to reach the primary ballot through signature gathering, which can lead to a primary. Then it says the convention winner, essentially, they can advance directly to the general election, which is what the bylaws of the GOP say. And also, really what I believe that the law says. People say, we've got to get rid of SB 54. The truth is, we've given SB 54 the ability to do a lot of things that it was not really designed to do, and that's coming straight from Kurt Bramble and Dan McCabe. Both of them will admit that SB 54 has been kind of perverted and turned into something it really was not intended to do. And that is to force a primary or a convention winner to go to on a ballot for a primary. The other thing that I've learned through all of this that I thought was really kind of enlightening was the primary process includes the convention. So it's not, you can win a convention or you can go to a primary. The primary or the convention is part of the primary process. And once you get above 60%, that's essentially, there is no primary. Now SB 54 says that these candidates can, get onto a primary by getting signatures. And the way I read that, it would be one of two things. You'd either have two people come out of convention, so there is going to be a primary, and they get to participate as well as anybody that gathered signatures. The other scenario would be that the convention winner doesn't have to participate in a primary. If the GOP wants to go ahead and have a primary and allow other contenders to participate in a primary, you'd end up with two Republicans on the general election ballot.
Oh, interesting.
I don't see anything as I read through the code, and granted, the code is, subject to interpretation and it's convoluted, but I don't see anything that says that a convention winner, an outright convention winner, has to participate in a second round of the primary when he's already won the primary outright.
Right.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just want to add, that's how it's always been interpreted, too, up until this race. And if you look at even Spencer Cox is on camera talking about how if you get over 60% at convention, then you go straight to the general. He's like, that's it. And a story, you move on, go straight to the general. And that's how it was always been interpreted up until this contest. And then now we've got over the 60%, and then they force us into a primary, which we believe never should have happened. So not only do we think the law doesn't support it, but the interpretation that has been through the years has never supported that either. So
let me clarify a couple of things that I'm hearing here. So, and then I have another question. So one of the things that I'm hearing is that it sounds like past gubernatorial elections, and granted, we've only had, 3 now under SB 54, but the other two, the scenario held where there was going to be a primary because we advanced 2 people out of the convention.
That's right.
And so in this case, right. Yeah. You could argue that, it was handled differently than the other ones were, even though it holds for either interpretation in those cases. The other thing that I'm hearing, though, is that, there are, I guess, multiple interpretations of what SB 54 means. And so my question is this what you're hoping to get from the Supreme Court case? Is this kind of a clarification where they say not just, yes, there is a conflict, or no, there isn't a conflict, but also if there, if SB 54 turns out to be constitutionally viable or whatever, right, that they say, and this is what it should be interpreted as.
Yeah, I guess, if the Supreme Court came and said SB 54 is constitutional and therefore a person that gets signatures can force a primary election, a second primary election, then I guess they would be going back on what they decided in the Lopez-Torres case, or Torres-Lopez case. So, but they could do that, and it would put some finality to this. Basically, it would say no, legislatures can dictate party process in selecting their candidates, and I guess there's a chance that they could do that.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm asking is if they do that, is it possible that they also come back and say, and this is interpreted the way that you've explained it, as opposed to the way that it actually got run this last election? So could they interpret the law as well?
Yeah, the way that I've explained it.
Yeah. Could the Supreme Court or the panel of judges that you were talking about, could they interpret the law for us as well, or would they kick that back to the?
No, I think they very well could come and say that Utah, the lieutenant governor's office, mishandled this election, and I think this is a really important point. And people say, well, what's you and Trent Staggs are in the same same boat, and we are in the fact that we've won the convention. But my gripe is with the person who oversees the elections. His gripe is with somebody else who's not the perpetrator of a fraud. And so my case takes on a little bit more of a direct challenge to the lieutenant governor's office, to the governor's office, which I think is really important. And then whether the Supreme Court takes some of these, the color of law issues into account, I think it's really important, that if Spencer Cox qualified for a ballot by gathering signatures, then we've got 2 audits now that show that he came up short on his signatures. Now they can explain that away. They can, justify it or say, coulda, shoulda, woulda. But the truth is he didn't get 28,000 valid signatures. So I think that's a non-issue in context of the central question, but it colors things as it goes forward, as does, inducing 2 other Lymans to run as write-in candidates. Right. All of these things, when you start stacking it all up together, I think the Supreme Court could say, hang on, we've got a lieutenant governor's office that is out of control in Utah. This is not the way you run elections, and people deserve a little bit more transparency and a little bit more integrity than that.
So I have a quick question. So the main question before the Supreme Court is back to the original question with SB 54 is, does a party, right, have a right, if somebody wins over 60% right now as it stands, to dictate the nominees and where they go and how they end up on the general ballot? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. It's not the number of signatures or the audit, or it doesn't deal with any of that. It's the original. No. Okay. Yeah. I did have a comment too. I have seen the governor's remarks regarding that they go straight to it, and the time on that. It looks like he made those comments prior to SB 54, when that would have been accurate. Do we know when it was said? I thought it was 2017 or something. I think it's after for.
Oh,
okay. I haven't seen the date on it. I just thought that would make a difference.
Yeah, it's definitely after 2014.
Okay. Yeah. I just didn't know if the timeline on that, because that would matter, right? That would be at one point it'd be accurate, and at one point it would be,
And that's I went and listened to the whole speech, because I thought, is he saying absent SB 54 this would be the case? But he's not saying that. He's putting it in context with SB 54, and this is how it works. And you win. End of story. He was affirming the fact that candidate can still win at convention if they win outright.
Okay, fascinating. And this has been, and I have to say, it's been an interesting issue in Utah County for those who have attended our central committee meetings. And even our last one, I think 2 of it's been a subject at the microphone. And just from our party perspective, anybody who, takes on this subject of appreciating a party's right to pick their nominee, we are super grateful to and for. And so I know there are other things that factor into this, and that some people might not be in favor of, or how things were done. But just from us and the process, and having submitted something to the Supreme Court that deals with that specific issue, we're very grateful to that. We, of course, would err on the side of a private organization, a party being able to select their own nominees. So absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. And I just want to reiterate one other thing, and that is, with all the conversations that we have with people within at least the county party, a lot of people have strong feelings about, this and the way that a lot of this went. And what I really hope is that we can all still look at each other and fight for the principles that we care about, regardless of any of the outcomes with any of this stuff.
Right. And that really is the intent here, is to strengthen the caucus system, because we believe that's the best way to get good candidates, and candidates who support the platform. And so that's why we took this fight up. And it's interesting with the right of association, if you take it outside of the political arena and you put it into like a religious organization, does a state have the right to put leadership of a religious organization? Should the state be involved in that conversation and that decision? Clearly not. I mean, they shouldn't be able to do that. And so why would they be able to do that with political parties too? So it's concerning. We have a right of association beyond just our political arena that we need to protect. And we feel like this is part of protecting it.
Yeah, we're definitely aligned there for sure.
Yeah, it comes back to, for me, and we have this conversation pretty frequently, is that the party is there to get its platform implemented into law. Mm-hmm. And so then the party's purpose is, well, one of the main purposes is to put people into office who are going to enact those laws, right? Mm-hmm. And who are going to enforce them. And so the best way we have to do that is by vetting the candidates in an effective way, and that's the caucus convention system. Now, are there ways that we could improve it? Sure, right? Is there a better way of doing things? Probably, but, you know, that's what the party settled on, and it's been rather effective. And so since we are fighting for these values and these principles, you know, we have the right to choose people who are going to espouse those principles.
Yeah. Do you know what I found so ironic? And I've appreciated that this has happened is as this redistricting issue came up with, you know, Amendment D and the initiatives and super laws, for those who are familiar with that, the legislature, and if you went up to the special session, I think a lot of us were there, if not all of us were there that day. Phil was definitely there. But the speeches given on the floor by our elected officials were passionate speeches toward the principle of representative government. And I walked away just really feeling the correlation between what we have and continue to, and I don't want to say fight for, but just espouse the virtues of with the caucus system and having our delegates. It is the same exact principles as representative government that they were advocating for that day. And so I found that very interesting. They do understand the principle, you know, as soon as it knocks on their door. And so, you know, we'll see how this next little bit goes. I know people will advocate for, you know, a broader reach on these types of things. I would reference them to the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, who both wrote extensively about, you know, their hatred towards pure democracies across the board, and why representative government matters so much. And so it was heartwarming to hear them, because I realized the correlations. And also, I walked away that day just kind of smirking, going, "Oh, you guys do get it," you know. So it was fascinating. And for those who do, and there are a lot who do, and they are on this side of freedom of association and private parties. So
yeah, and the legislature is an interesting place, and having been there the last 6 years and kind of learning a little bit how things are done there, you find a lot of people who want to own this topic. They want to stand up for election integrity. They want to run the bill that's going to, you know, bring election integrity. They just don't want to do it this election. They don't want to put it in before this election. You know, we're going to take away all the powers of the lieutenant governor to oversee elections, but we're going to wait till after. You know, that came up in 2023 with Wilcox's bill, and it was the governor that said, "Hey, I'll support that, but let's do it after the election." And that's I mean, that's like the siren song or whatever of politicians is, I'm, you know, next time, you just wait and see how tough I'm going to be next time.
Yeah, we're with you.
So, oh, good.
Oh, I've been reading Martin Luther King Jr. book over Christmas, but one thing that he really talks about is the urgency of making change. And if we sit back, we're complex. Here's one quote from it. He says, "We must learn that passively to accept an unjust system is to cooperate with that system, and thereby to become a participant in its evil." And so if we just sit back and we accept it, we don't push back. And then what matters is the urgency matters, and we have to make change now. And I really appreciate that about him and how he made change. And also, he talks a lot about how change has to happen through being non-compliant in some ways. You know, that's how you make peaceful change, is to pushing back against systems. And we feel like we saw problems. We have to stand up and continue to push back right now, because it is right in front of our faces, and to push it off and say, well, next session we'll change it or something is not sufficient. Things have to be changed now to have it really be effective. The
other thing that a few people have said, to me personally, like, I'm so sorry, you deserve to be the governor. And it's like, this has nothing to do with me. This has Utah deserves to choose their governor. If they want Spencer
Yes.
Cox, they deserve to vote for him and have him win the election. If they vote for somebody else, then they deserve to not have Spencer Cox be the governor after they've gone through the right process to elect somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Right. One of the things that Natalie said that I want to kind of jump on, and it kind of segues into where I wanted to go next anyway, is you basically said being non-compliant. And one of the things that you all did after the primary election is that you filed to be a write-in candidate during the general election. And that was a jagged little pill for a few people to swallow, right? Just saying, hey, look, we already have a Republican on the ballot. And so, why do this? And I'm wondering if you can kind of explain, the thought process and why you did a write-in campaign. And then if we can talk a little bit about the results as well, like, what you actually saw coming out of that.
I'll jump into that. The fight at the beginning, and a big motivation, actually my motivation for getting into politics to start with was because I saw collusion and corruption between policymakers and outside entities that was ending in really bad policy. And
I want to act shocked, but I can't.
And sometimes it really hurts people. Like legitimately destroys people's lives with some of the bad policy, especially when we talk about, public lands policies and issues, and the federal government colluding with big environmental groups and shutting down industries and, tearing down coal plants and all this kind of stuff. And so that got me into the county commission to kind of fight back on some of that. And and so that's a fight that took me to the legislature, took me to running for governor. One of the first speeches I gave was the Salt Lake County Lincoln Day dinner. And that's what I said, when you've got people that don't understand personhood and parenthood and statehood, they tend to kind of go with the highest bidder and see kind of like, what's in this for me, or how can Utah really benefit? How can we get more money? Whatever the case might be. And the net result is corruption. And it's not the corruption of, bags of cash and smoke-filled rooms. It's policy that favors people who are willing to play the game and excludes those who are not willing to play the game. And you let that go for very long in government, and you end up with some really expert game players. And those that don't want to play the game find out really quickly that they're going to be, marginalized as legislators. And if we're okay with that, if we're okay with that system of government, then we'll do exactly what we've done for the last 7 or 8 years, maybe longer than that. But if we're tired of it, then we would throw that off. And this election, I think it resonated with a lot of people that this was the time to throw off that syndicate system. And so it was huge. And I guess getting back to running for write-in candidate was just an extension of that, saying I always say in Star Trek, the Borg would tell Captain Picard, resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. Well, resistance isn't futile, and we have to continue to resist. And in our case, to exhaust all of our administrative remedies, which was running as a write-in, filing lawsuits. And we've got a bunch of lawsuits besides just the Supreme Court case. But all those things are part and parcel of refusing to comply, as Natalie said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to touch on that really quick with fairness across the board. And when you have policy that will advantage some and disadvantage others, I'm a big fan of the Utah Constitution and Article 1, Section 2, which was actually used in the redistricting Supreme Court case, that government is supposed to be for the equal benefit of all, is where I really get hung up, because SB 54, although it has the appearance of a low barrier to entry, it's actually a violation in the sense that the caucus system allows for ideas, and the participation with ideas to be the number one barrier to entry or selection process. When you do SB 54, you are introducing large amounts of money into a system because it's the only way that you can get that done. And so you are picking winners and losers in the barrier to entry, because if you don't have that amount of money to collect that amount of signatures, which very few private people do, and then the only other way to get that is to have a large war chest, where you have a lot of donors who have contributed because they want you in office. And so for me, SB 54 is a fairness issue, and caucus eliminates the majority of those barriers. It's the reason why in Utah County, we've advocated for not even charging for booths when people come to our convention, regardless of how much money they have. And that's just our leadership. That may change. I know people have in the past. But we have these conversations that if the party exists, so that ideas are the cream that rise, that good ideas do, and that regardless of, the income of the person that has those ideas, that's the barrier to entry. So I really resonate with this idea that we have policy across the state of Utah that is picking winners and losers in all areas right now. And SB 54 for me is just a reflection of that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. That just reminded me of, so this case of SB 54 was litigated. It was a different issue, but it was in 2018. And the dissenting judge was Justice Timkovich, and his dissenting opinion was really good. But he touched on that same thing that you brought up, Cristy. He says that this SB 54, he mentions that it purposely tries to change the substantive type of candidate the party nominates, all the while masquerading as a mere procedural reform. So it's changing who is getting on the ballot. And he recognized that because he could see that it's the candidates are getting on the ballot who were not chosen by the delegates, but they were able to get on through using fame or wealth to be able to gather these signatures, because that's really what you need to do to gather 28,000 plus signatures on the ballot. Is you need to have a great amount of money and the name recognition, so it favors incumbencies, and where the delegate system, the convention system really makes it fair across the board, and you get a different type of candidate who is there to represent the people and to represent the platform. So I think you're right on, and we appreciate seeing that from the justice earlier on.
Yeah, and just back to that freedom of association idea. If I run a club, I don't think the government should be telling me how to choose leadership for the club or who liaises between the club and any other entity. And
Right.
So when you get right down to it, if we want to have a hot dog eating contest or a dance off for our leadership, maybe we need, a better way of picking people, but that's our prerogative in my club. And, if the party wants to do a caucus convention system because we feel like that's the best way to get our values and our principles put into practice, then that's what we do.
Right. And there's also an inverse right of not to associate. And we saw our Senate candidate, our new senator, who was rejected by the delegates in a lot, by big margins, but he is now our sitting senator because he was able to bypass the whole party nominating process by getting signatures. So we're being penalized that way too.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I want to kind of bring into this a little bit, and it's another piece of the things that I think we wanted to talk about with this, is I feel like a lot of people are looking for, how do I put it? I guess kind of the final answer to, or final solution to a lot of the things that we're talking about, right? And I get that the Supreme Court thing that you're doing could be that thing, but a lot of people way back in 2016 thought that the lawsuit was going to be the thing that ended SB 54. And then people thought that, hey, we've got enough legislators who want to do this, and so we can get it repealed, and that's going to fix it. But as time has gone on, I think it's become more and more apparent that the likely scenario is that we're going to be dealing with this a piece at a time, right? We're not going to, I think a lot of people were hoping that the write-in campaign would somehow overwhelm the votes for Spencer Cox and we would just fix it that way, right? And so given that that's not necessarily the case, I still think of the write-in campaign, just with the headway that you made and the percentage of the vote that you got, I still see that as progress. And I was hoping you could speak to that a little bit, and then maybe some of the other ways that we can make headway toward reclaiming our ability as a party to name the nominees that end up on the ballot.
Yeah, statistically, write-in campaigns just don't. You can't win when your name's not even on the ballot. But we wanted to give it everything we had, and we did. And I was thinking optimistically, the most I could envision us getting would be about 15%, short of some other event happening, which always happens in politics. So we got close to 14%, which was huge.
Wow.
The most write-in votes of anybody in U.S. history, which is pretty amazing. And mainstream media has not said one word about that. So what it did do was show that we are not a viable candidate. We were excluded from the debates, and we said we shouldn't be excluded from the debates. We're a viable candidate, and they're like, well, you're polling at less than 5%. It's like, that's not true. We're polling much higher than that, and so that kind of validated some of those things. It has drawn a lot of attention nationally from some of the kind of the MAGA crowd, and the more conservative right wingers are saying, hey, what's going on in Utah? This is not, the Lyman Clawson team is clearly has a lot of people supporting them here. And then they want to go back and look, and they see, 68% at convention, and the signature issue with Spencer Cox, the primary election, that they won't allow anybody to look at anything to do with the cast vote records or anything like that. All these things combined, and it's like, what is going on in Utah? That's what Jack Posobiec, did that post. What is going on in Utah? And a lot of people jumped in and said, well, hey, we can tell you what's happening here, and it's not good. It's not the way you run an election. Essentially, our narrative has been that our elections have been hijacked, and if we could look at it, if we could look at those things closely, we'd find out more information. I didn't want to just come out and accuse the governor of not getting his 28,000 signatures, but I, as a CPA and in my business, I couldn't come up with another reason why you would be so protective of the records than the fact that you've got something to hide. Why would you not disclose these? And I feel the same way about the primary election results. Why would you not just, the lieutenant governor sent a letter out to all of the clerks at the same time that I made the request, or let them know that we were going to be asking for cast vote records. She sent a letter basically prohibiting them from giving those, and not a friendly letter towards us. And those things really, they're very, it's like, how do you tell somebody you don't have the information without telling them you don't have the information? You do exactly what the lieutenant governor and the governor were doing. And so the more people do look into it, the more problems they find. Utah County is the only county that was able to have a statistician come in and look at their cast vote records, or I guess close to it, their detailed canvas report. And they came back and said there's clearly an algorithm at work here, meaning that this is not completely natural the way these votes came in Utah County. And I think if we could look at Davis and Salt Lake and Cache County, would see that even more. And I'll also just sorry, I'm just kind of rambling here, but so the primary election came out 46 to 54, separation of about 37,000 votes. But in an election, that's not really a 37,000 vote separation. That's a 19,000 vote separation. Mm-hmm. And that's a really thin margin when you put it into the context.
So I'm familiar with Utah County, with the Board of Canvassers situation, and previously in a race. And this is more of just a recognition, and one of the things that could possibly be implemented for the legislature to take a look at is that when I originally started looking into election integrity, there was this false sense of security that was put on, what I heard of was the Board of Canvassers and their right to certify an election. And then as we dug into it, we realized that they don't have an option, and then they don't even get to look. So they must certify, and they don't get to look at the cast vote records. And so when, we looked at that and we said, wait, hold on. What I hear from the legislature is, oh, don't worry. The Board of Canvassers will go ahead and take a look, and their certification will be some sort of, good faith, some trust that you can have in the system. But then as we started to dig into what the Board of Canvassers have access to, they were not even, at least in Utah County, I don't want to speak for any other counties, Utah County Board of Canvassers, they were also not able to look at the cast vote record. And then so then the question that followed that was, well, how can you certify something you never got to look at? So I said to our commissioners at the time, this was a different set of commissioners. Some of them were the same and some were different. I said, this seems like political theater. This is political theater to say that we should have trust in something that you couldn't look at, that you are legally bound to certify. So you're saying you have to do it. We're saying, and then the legislature is telling us, because you did it, we should have faith and trust in it because you did it. And you're saying you never even got to look at it. It like blew my mind that that's what that was. So I have mentioned to a couple, I haven't taken this up probably. Well, one, I didn't think there were other people who have a bigger dog in the fight that should have done this, people who hold those positions that should have taken this up as soon as they recognize the error, as they were the ones certifying it. But this is on my list of things to see if a legislator will take up. And if there is a Board of Canvassers, they need to be able to see the cast vote records, period, end of story. If they're going to certify if somebody is going to tell you, if you're going to say that the math checked out, but you never looked at the math, for me, it's political theater. That was just the way I saw it. And I'm pretty sure it hasn't been fixed since then. I haven't seen anything come through. So,
well, and the thing is, you go back and, there was a time when Utah had a Secretary of State, and the elections were handled by them, when our caucus system was robust and active, and when the elections happened on a single day and were counted at the precinct level. And all these things worked really, really well. So you have to say, why did we change that?
Yeah.
Why and why don't we go back to that? And the only thing, again, that I come up with is it would be really hard to cheat with under the old system. And there's nothing really defensible about the new system. They can say, oh, well, it's so much faster and it's so much more accurate. Well, it's certainly not faster. Now we take weeks to get a result back on elections. It's not verifiable. No one can look at it. And then by contract, the state has, given a lot of the voter roll information to ERIC, the Electronic Records Information Center, and the Center for Technology and Innovation oversees all this. It's like we have watched literally the election system get hijacked, and people just need to admit to themselves that we are being played. And they think, oh, well, that might be happening on a national level, but it's happening in spades right here in Utah. And the legislature is forced through this last election, I think really through our efforts more than anything else, they're forced to confront some of these glaring issues that in the past we've just shrugged and gone along with.
And I want to say that's the number one thing. Sorry, Chuck. That's the number one thing that I've been grateful to you guys for. And Natalie knows that there's some things that I, especially the Supreme Court case, totally right with you guys. There have been some social media things that I've loved and hated. There have been some people, not necessarily you guys, but other people that I think are viewed coming in your name, whether they are or aren't. That I think have left a bad taste in people's mouths. But what you just said right there is probably one of the things that I'm most grateful for, is that it has brought to the forefront a conversation that I think would have, got either neglected or something else would have been a greater precedence this year. And so I'm really grateful for that, because you can have the conversations now. But I wanted to ask Natalie, and I know Natalie knows this, because she and I have had conversations about the old system and gone through 20A, which is the election code, and to say, if what do you think would be the, best, greatest system that people could look at and say, that system is a system that I can trust, looking
Right.
toward how we've done things versus how we do things right now?
Yeah, great question. I mean, go back to the tried and true, what we did forever. It was back to like the 1985 code. A lot of it it's all in there about decentralizing, because right now we're going to the system where we're centralizing all these processes, which is really bringing more concerns and ways for them to manipulate systems. But if we can decentralize it like we did before, vote in the precinct, have your ballots being counted in the precinct. We had 3 election judges who would watch each other as they count. I mean, exactly what we did in the Utah County GOP when we were handling elections. We'd have the election judges watch as you count them and make sure all the numbers are adding up equally with witnesses there. It's a secure system. It's one that you can have a lot of people who can feel confident in it being accurate results. And I like what you brought up about the Board of Canvassers and how that's a concern, how they say, don't worry, they are certifying it, but they don't have access to it. I feel like that's the direction we're going with our entire elections. There's so many things that they're giving us this false sense of security about our elections. And when you brought that up, it reminded me of these cameras now. We have cameras on our ballot, on these drop boxes, but who watches what's on the cameras? Like I've heard of grandma requests being denied to be able to view the cameras. I know I've talked to county clerks who they don't have the manpower to go and watch through all this hours of tape. So the cameras are there, but do we actually look at them? Another thing I thought of was they say I can see if my vote was counted. Well, that actually just shows if your envelope was counted and received, but that doesn't indicate your vote. So that's a little bit of a false security we give people. And then a third example is the audit. And I helped with an audit a couple of years ago, and we went in there, and then the clerk said, okay, these are the boxes that the lieutenant governor told us to audit. So we had to audit the boxes she gave us to audit. So it's another one of those false security things, but we don't need to go this direction. And we can see down the path of how they want to have us vote through phones, mobile apps and other things, which is going to create even more concern. So we need to change right now, go back to a system that we can trust, something that's been tried and true, back to vote in person, show ID. And it's not just Utah. We're seeing this a big national push to be able to go back to a system that we can trust. And we have the answers here, and we just in time to find those again.
Yeah, which is okay. I have a one of my concerns that I think was lost is a cultural piece. We know as kids, when we would go to school and the booths would be set up, and we would see people in our community walking through the doors to do their, civic duty. And then as I got older, I would go with my parents, we'd stand in line, we would talk. I feel like having students that are in schools watch the process and see the process is not just a small thing that we've lost. Like, I actually think it's quite a big thing that we've lost to say, oh, this is what we do. On this day, everybody comes and everybody watches, and you stand in line with your neighbors and you have these conversations about the things that you have in common, the values that you want people. And I do know people have said that they have somewhat replaced that with sitting, at the table and going over their mail-in ballots with their kids. If I'm comparing the two of them, doing that also as you talk with your neighbors and go to schools and have kids see the process is something really valuable that I think we might look back and go, we were missing the culture piece of our whole system through that process. Anyway, I would love to see it. And I think Natalie and I, a couple of years ago, interviewed this wonderful woman down the road for me. That's like, I think she's 86 or 87 now. And she had worked for the city, and she was this wealth of knowledge on how this process worked. And I thought, oh man, we are going to lose these people who knew how it worked. And they say, well, they counted them in the precincts, and how do you know? And I thought, they all signed their names to this piece of paper, these sweet, usually women who sat there for, hours to do this service to their community. And like you said, decentralization, if there were to be some nefarious acts of corruption, they would have to, I think we have about 415 precincts in Utah County right now. To be able to centralize something, of that nature would be extremely difficult. And so just the decentralization part for me is a must when you're talking about this stuff. And then, like you said, counting, we count, I know many counties do when they hold especially special elections, they count right in front of everybody. And I was talking to somebody yesterday that we've never once had a complaint. Everybody's got their election judges. If somebody has an issue, we let them stand there and watch. Our ballots still have chain of custody. I could pull any of them right now from the special elections and the chain of custody is still intact and we could recount right now. And so that transparency is everything. And people will say, well, there isn't anything going on. I thought the problem with elections right now is that the perception, people have to be able to see the process to trust it. And that's missing. That's missing across the board, even with the Board of Canvassers seeing the cast vote records.
Right.
So,
yeah. I want to jump in here just because I want to echo something that Cristy started with when she asked the question to Natalie, and that was that a lot of people feel like because we haven't solved all these issues yet, we're not making progress or we're not winning on this issue. And I just want to encourage people, look, the fact that we're having this conversation, right? Kudos to Phil and Natalie for bringing this to people's attention, right? And then, we're all talking about the conversations we're having about this stuff. We are making headway. And I think a lot of times where we fail or fall down is just by letting the momentum die. And so more than anything else, I want to encourage people to continue to have these conversations, right? To talk about, hey, what would make you confident in the election, right? What would you have to see, right? Or what would you have to be hearing from people in the know that are in your neighborhood or from the county clerk or even in the news, whether or not you trust them. But what would make you confident that the election went the way that you want it to, right? And so all the things that Natalie talked about and Cristy talked about, those are the things that, and there are probably other ideas, but we have to continue to work on this. I don't think there's a silver bullet for this. Right? I don't think there's a silver bullet where we say, if we do all 10 of these things, we're going to have completely safe, whatever, confident elections. But we can get so much further down the road. And that's what we've gotten from this, if nothing else, is that confidence. If we have some of these things go into play where it's, for me, it's auditability, right? Or transparency is what a lot of people are talking about. It's the same idea, but at the end of the day, where I can go back and I can look at what happened, and I can essentially prove that the solution to the problem of who got elected is correct, right? With a high level of confidence, right? I love all the cultural and other ideas, but for me, the key thing is the outcome that we were told, the outcome that we can prove is correct.
Yeah. And they're going to enter the door through all of this stuff through convenience. We're going to sell our souls over convenience. It drives me crazy. It's an easy sell, and once people get a taste of it and they aren't close enough to look at the real issues with it, and there's a lot of things that are convenient that are stupid to do. So you can eat through a drive-through every day of your life, but it's probably not going to be a good idea for your health. So convenience does not equal better. Elections, that has been the battle cry, but it's convenient. We get more people to participate because of the convenience. And then they don't follow it up with, well, what's lost? What do you lose? What do you lose when you go for convenience? Verifiability and trust are two of the big things that get on the chopping block as soon as you go for convenience. So it was also kind of convenient just to go down to my local school. So,
Well, I think the other piece of this is people keep thinking about technology as a solution to this. But the problem is back to the question of being able to audit the results. If it's in a computer and it runs through a computer, then you have to be able to trust the algorithm. I mean, this is what I do for a living, right? Is I build systems. Now, usually they're on the web, but it's really easy if you want the computer to do a specific thing to tell it to do that. And that includes, counting the votes a specific way. And so if you have a paper record that you can go look at, or if you have, some other record, right? People are talking about blockchain. I'm not going to get into that because I have my own views on that. But, I think if done properly, maybe, But blockchain in and of itself isn't the answer. And so you have to understand the process, like somebody said that. You have to understand the process, and then you have to be able to look at it and make sure that the process was followed. And so those are the things that I care about. And I feel like, some of this is the principles we're talking about with SB 54, but some of this was the process that was followed with the signature gathering, and the process that was followed with gathering the votes, and the process that was followed in tabulating the votes. And those things are all concerning too, right? And then you get into some of this stuff where like signature verification is completely subjective based on who's verifying the signatures. And so is there even an objective standard that we can follow that says this means matched signature and this doesn't, or this means spoiled ballot and this means valid ballot.
Yeah,
right?
The person standing in front holding their ID voting in person. That's how you do it. That's literally the only way. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a widely accepted way of validating somebody's identity. And so it seems like an obvious answer, right? Yeah. And I don't know that I necessarily advocate for that as the answer over anything else that's equally reliable, but you have to demonstrate to me that that other thing is reliable. Mm-hmm. And the way that we do it now, I have some serious questions about that. But yeah, I'm going to stop talking. I'm just curious, like, what other things are we looking at right here, right? I mean, you guys have brought up several things, but yeah, what else is there? What else is out there we can use?
I think, I don't know if anybody saw that Joe Rogan, his stand-up thing, and he said something to the effect that 4 years ago, I was a big proponent of vaccinations. Now I don't even believe we went to the moon, And basically, it's like we've been lied to, and we really are in a different spot than we were 4 years ago. People are looking and saying, what else? What else? Mm-hmm. What else is a lie? Right. And so, but there is this. What we found is that there are people who stock and trade is a false narrative, and they're very good at it. They're very good at gaslighting, very good at making people believe that everybody thinks this way, and you're the only ones that are out of step. Spencer Cox called us the populists. It's like, what are they if they're not considered? Well, they're populists. Well, that's a label that's supposed to be like discrediting, but it's like the opposite of a populist is an elitist. And yeah, we are populists. We accept that. We accept that title. And when we put it in this election space, it's interesting because they'll come in and rag on the convention and how they elect really bad candidates, and it's a broken system. It's like, well, we didn't break it. You broke it when you came in and found this end run and basically continue to send this narrative that the delegates are radical right wingers. And the more you do that, the fewer and fewer people that are willing to like enter into that until here recently, the people are ready to throw off that logic. I looked up on the internet false logic. One of them is appeal to authority, and a lot of times the authority is yourself. It's like I've given this so much thought, and this is where I come down. And they said the other technical term for that is bullshitting, and it's a technical term. It's not a swear word when it's in technical terms, but people see it as that. It's like I'm not buying it anymore. So yep. Whether it's the lieutenant governor's office that comes out with something, that 4 years ago people would have said, well, that makes sense. Now they're saying they're just calling BS on mm-hmm. stuff, and it puts us in a really kind of unique threshold of saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do now? Are we going to fix this, or are we going to, retreat back to where we feel safe and disagree better and all of that stuff?
Yeah. Well, and that comes back to, because it's interesting, two things. One is you talked about, people get labeled as whatever, but yeah, as people lose trust in government or news or whoever is calling people that, all of a sudden we gain credibility by getting labeled. and it's really been interesting because some people, it was like, well, if 5 years ago I thought all you guys were crazy, but then I realized I was getting lied to, and so now I'm wondering if these other people were just lying to me, and you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part of it is again, because people don't trust the institutions, that's why we need a system where we can prove the result. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Good point.
Yeah. I love the disconnect between the term populist versus the advocating for a, larger membership base to pick their candidates, right? Because those are contrary to each other. And it's ironic that, when you look up populists, they can range anywhere from Martin Luther King Jr. to Bernie Sanders to Ron Paul. So when the word populist is thrown around, feels right. It's just talking about a group of people who have recognized something that elites are doing that they disagree with, and they start to voice it. And so I looked at that and I went, well, yeah, maybe. I do. Okay, I have a quick question.
Hang on. Because I just have to point this out. I love it when Cristy defines terms, because realistically, when Spencer Cox or anyone else says populist or fascist or racist or whatever, what they mean is big, scary term that we can use to demean people we don't like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the people who are hearing it that aren't thinking the way that I think you and I think is they just hear the term and they just associate bad things with those people, and that's all they're looking for, right? Because once you actually get in and define terms, then you actually have to prove your case, and the thought process never actually gets that far.
So true.
Yeah, it's a tactic for sure. Okay, so this might be a little controversial with people that have followed this scenario of what happened to you guys, but I did find that in the process, I don't know if you guys are familiar with a school board race that we had, where an individual was in the packet to fill out to file, they were missing a piece of paper. Right. And then they were disqualified as a candidate because they were missing a piece of paper that they didn't know was supposed to even be in the packet. And they ended up having to take that to court. And the court ruled in their favor that they were a candidate and that it had been, the election officials, who was supposed to put that packet together, that it was their fault and that this person was a candidate. When I looked at that case, I found that somewhat similar, that and this is where it gets controversial. It wasn't necessarily Cox's campaign as far as the signatures go. They were told they had enough and that they could stop. And I think anybody in that situation would have, said, okay, good. They said that we made it. So is that why, most of your lawsuits are geared toward the lieutenant governor in that process? Do I have a correct understanding of that?
I'm not sure. Oh, go ahead, Natalie. If you.
Well, it was just one thought is that, you asked earlier on about misinformation, about understanding about the case, and people saying that he was told he had enough signatures. One piece of information a lot of people don't know is back in March, there was a communication between Brian McKenzie, who is the chair, who is the county clerk for Davis County, who was doing the signature verification, with the lieutenant governor's office, saying, it was referring to all these packets that were turned over to the Attorney General's office. And that was happening at the same time that he was getting certified to have enough signatures to have met that threshold. So to say he didn't know at the time is not accurate, because they were being informed from Davis County that there was problems and investigations going on onto lots of the signatures. So that's one answer. And then another is when they say they told him, who is they? They is the lieutenant governor's office, which is his running mate. And so there's really not a separation to say that our office, like Phil mentioned earlier, is different than some of the other candidates, where we're running against the person who is doing the whole verification and the whole running the elections. And they're held to a different standard, because they are the who are certifying that this election is happening, that things are being done legitimately. But,
okay, so is that you would say that's probably one of the misconceptions that people had. I know timeline. There's misconceptions with timelines and how things happened or when things were filed. One of the things that I heard was that with the primary, that you guys were, called, they were called sore losers, and said that you didn't file until the primary ended. Is that accurate or not accurate?
File our lawsuit on the signatures?
Yeah.
So we filed as quickly as we could file. We were making the allegations. We were asking the records committee, can we look at the signatures? Can we look at the packet? Can we have this information? And they actually, one of them, they said, you can look at the signature packets, but we're going to have to redact it. So it's going to be like the end of June before you can look at, which was well after the primary. So it's like we would go through all of these proper steps, and then you don't just jump in and file a lawsuit right off. You file a lawsuit when nothing seems to be working. So we felt like we filed that really as timely, as quickly as anyone could have filed the lawsuit. And I raised the question soon after the caucus about the validity of Spencer Cox's signatures, and that's what got the discussion starting. Is we're saying we want to see these signatures, and then the amount of obfuscation that went on is what brought us to the lawsuit ultimately.
I want to point out another misconception that you answered in your answer, because I had some people essentially, say, well, we have people asking, like in September or October, they're saying, well, people are now asking for the signatures to get turned over. Why didn't Phil Lyman and his campaign ask for the signatures during the window where they could ask for them? And you basically just said that you did that in the proper window after the within the 30 days or whatever they have after the deadline to get the signatures. So I just want to point that out as well, because as far as I can tell, the more I look into things, you did everything in the proper order, and you just didn't get what you were entitled to under law.
Yeah, I always say schemers are always 10 steps ahead of people of goodwill, and you don't know what the scheme is that's going on. I will tell you this: if we knew everything about the governor's signatures, it'd be worse than what we've seen reported. And no one's talked about the thousands of signatures that were turned over to the Attorney General's office because they were clearly fraudulent. Well, that's a crime, but no one's being prosecuted for it. I think there is an investigation going on, but of course we're not privy to that, and the media doesn't cover that. No one has ever come up and said, wait a second, legislative auditor, you just said there's thousands of signatures that were turned over to the lieutenant governor's office. And to Natalie's point, there was communications about real concerns that were raised clear back in March. But they could have still done something to gather more signatures or done something about it. All these things really matter. And what it is a ruse. We're being played here. And if we knew all of the truth, it would be worse than the truth that we've been able to ferret out, one little piece at a time. And believe me, the media has, been the opposite of helpful on this. They're the main ones that want to, promote the false narrative that we're sore losers. And that one doesn't bother me because I really could care less what they think about that. And the truth is, we're not sore losers. It's got nothing to do with that. They don't understand who we are or why we ran in the first place if they believe that this is sour grapes on our part, because it's not consistent with. We take this very, very seriously. We love the state of Utah. We love the GOP. We're not sore losers.
Yeah, one other thing I just want to point out is, you're essentially talking about the lack of transparency on some of this stuff, and that it would be worse if it came out. And if they were worried, they being, the lieutenant governor's office, if they were worried about the perception that it is worse, then they would be more transparent. I mean, I've talked to a number of people, and they're saying what Phil's saying, and their proof is the lack of transparency, which isn't actually proof, but it's really hard to swallow that it's not worse if you're not cooperating and making it easy to disprove that theory.
Right. I mean, it feels like a cover up at this point because of right. How much they push back against that and the information that they had. And to add to what Phil said, there is a statutory responsibility that you have to do before you can even take this to court. So we did the grandma request. We waited the 10 days for them to respond. And then we had to appeal to the chief administrative officer, wait 10 days. And then we had to do all of those steps before we could even take it to the district court. So we started this process well in advance of the primary election. And we really couldn't have expedited it any faster than we did. And we asked the court to expedite it too. And we've done all that we could to try to get this timely, to get this access to this information as quick as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that people don't understand. They don't understand when they just get the headline, and we have been victims of the headline as well, multiple times, and misunderstandings when it comes to that. And sorry, Phil, I had cut you off, but I would love you guys to talk about because this is so relevant to county parties and the state party, but also this withheld and private, as we try and also get our full membership list, and then what that means when you have, the designation of those things. And sometimes there is a good reason for someone to designate that, but the signing of a petition and the difference between being private and withheld and being a petition signer. Someone who's willing to put their name out there saying, I get behind this person. Oh, but wait, don't use my name, but I'm publicly stating that I, fully support them, but don't use my name. And I don't know if you found anything in code for that, or if if there's any fixes, coming down to fix that situation. But I saw that clearly from the get-go of, this is a problem both that you guys were uncovering and that the parties are dealing with too.
Yeah.
Can I jump in here real quick? Because I think the way Cristy put it might be a little bit confusing. So can you just restate it in like 2 sentences, what she's asking, and then answer it?
Thanks, Chuck.
You want me to restate it?
Yeah. Or explain the situation.
Okay. I'll try to jump in with kind of what my thoughts were while you're talking there. And sorry, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit there too, trying to go back and.
Yeah. So on social media, you guys had, and this was very compelling to people, is when you got the list, they were blank and they were listed as private, correct?
Yeah.
And that was very interesting to people to see that.
So I guess maybe what I would say is if people really want to understand what's going on, it does take a little bit of work. It does take actually reading the code and we were talking about the signatures. And they came in and they're like, ha, 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 Phil Lyman voted for the very bill that prevents him from getting the signatures. It's like, wait a second, I was the vice chair of that committee. What was on the table was that we were not going to have access to these. So we made it mandatory that the clerks would provide, instead of the picture of the signature, they would give the voter ID number, the name, and I think the address or something. So it wasn't saying we'll get nothing. It was saying we don't want voter identity theft by publishing people's signatures that I could lift off and put on a document as if they'd signed that. So we protected that, and that's the nuance. And you've got the Todd Weilers of the world that are out there just constantly just throwing this false narrative with tons of ridicule attached to it, and then people that say, oh well, they pick up on that and they run with it. Well, they're promoting the narrative. They're promoting the governor's narrative. They're not our friends. They're not the friends of the truth. They're the friends of the governor, and they're going to do whatever it takes. So I think maybe the point that I wanted to make is to understand this stuff does take some earnest work, maybe a little bit of discernment and a willingness to at least consider what's at stake. And the middle of a political campaign is not the best time to try to be messaging that. That's why, Michael Clara, who came and did this long video series about the governor's signatures, it was so appreciated because he's not running for office. He wasn't on our campaign. He just kind of came out of nowhere. We connected because he was trying to get some grammar requests on some Washington County races. And we just ended up kind of being this beautiful thing that happened. But even with that, you've got to go and you've got to actually listen to Michael Clara's videos. You got to watch all 10 or 11 of them and really pay attention. And then those that have come away really much better informed and I think more empowered to distinguish between the lies and the reality that's out there. And regardless of whatever motive they want to assign to us, we know, and I think most people that support us at this point know that our only objective has been to disclose what's happening and the truth. There's been no efforts to cover up anything on our part, and I hope that people start to recognize that, and they obviously did. The longer we were in it, the more people recognize this. It's like, whether they like Phil Lyman or not, the one thing we had going for us is we were right. So, and that's a really big thing.
So Natalie, petitions. What did you find out in because definitions and code really matter. Was there anything regarding petition?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's because there's a lot of kind of switching of definitions along the way, but it is a petition. It's defined in code as a nomination petition is a petition, and we can't find any other petition that's treated like this. All of them are open.
Hang on, I'm going to clarify something real quick. So when you say it's a petition, nominating petition is a petition, what you're saying is what we think of as the folks that come knock on your door and get a signature so somebody can appear on the primary ballot. That is the nominating petition. And what you're saying is that is a petition.
Right.
Go ahead and continue.
Exactly. So it's not like they're trying to apply, some people are trying to apply the voter rolls rules to this petition, where it's different. It's a document that people put themselves out to sign to nominate someone. And there's other petitions.
Hang on, I'm going to stop you again real quick. Okay. So the voter roll rules, now we're talking about, so people in Utah can register for a party and say that their party affiliation is withheld or private.
Right.
And so they're trying to apply that to them signing these petitions.
Yeah, and that seems to be the way that they handled it when they gave us the document, because 40% of it were withheld because they said they're private or withheld. And so we're saying, okay, number one, these should be treated as a petition where it's open to everyone to see. Okay, and then if you're not going to do that, now you're going to take some of this information and say it's private, withheld, or withheld, you can't see it. Then we say, but the rules on a private voter, it says my information will be private except it should be given to candidates. So we're saying that doesn't make sense. Then why don't we have that information? Code is very clear. Even when you check the box on the form, I want to be private, it means that my that political parties and candidates can see my information. So that didn't make sense why they treated it differently. Also, the people who gathered signatures, their names were none of those were marked off as being private or withheld. It was just a signer. So it was just the way they treated this document was very strange. And then the third one is that the way that they answered back to us why they didn't give us the full document is they said, this is a protected document. We can't give it to you. But then our question is, why did you give us some of it and not others? How can you have a document that only some of it's protected, not others protected? So none of it makes sense, really. Their arguments are all over the board. And really, they didn't even argue these things. They just denied it. And so we're trying to read into it, like, why are you not giving it to us? We have every right to see this. And also, this is something that a lot of people don't know, is just days before we went in and said, can we look at these packets? They let other people go in and look at other packets. And it was fine. They made an appointment with the Lieutenant Governor's office, walked in there, looked at packets, inspected them, held them. And then we followed up and said, we'd like to do the same. And they said, oh, no, you can't do this. You can't look at these things. And they were like, well, why did it change? And so you can't have people treated differently, especially when it's the governor's office, treat some things different than others. And there's no way, you can't back that up with state code either. So we're in court on those issues because it doesn't make sense. And like Phil said, I mean, it's been a long road to get to where we're at, but we're still fighting that because we believe we have a strong case that we should be able to see these packets and to know who nominated him for the ballot.
Right. I don't know the specifics of this, but also, and Natalie, you might know, there was discussion about the need to clarify in this upcoming session that the nominating petition should have been included in this list of petitions that is protected. So while they're saying it's protected, Lyman's lying to you, it's misinformation. Now, as soon as they get the opportunity, it's like, well, Lyman was right, but we should go in and protect this. So there's some efforts coming in the 2025 session to further protect candidate nominating petitions.
So do you know the audit that I would love to have? I would love to have an audit that gives us a final dollar amount that SB 54 has cost us in the bureaucracy, because we find one problem and have to create a whole nother process and structure and hire more employees to fix that problem. Then we have to fix another problem. And I thought, the other day, I wonder how much this has cost taxpayers, this process, just this runaround of a private party's ability to nominate their own, candidates for coming out of their party. How much has it cost us? The bureaucracy, the signature, machines that they had to purchase, like so much. And even, looking at this next legislative session and the bills that will come to fix these very things that we're talking about right here, because we are going to end up with a system and a bureaucracy on top of each other, on top of each other, on top of each other. Tons of taxpayer money. And if we could just go back to the way we did it, money is saved, transparency is revealed, trust is back. It blows my mind. It'll be very interesting to see how bigger this thing grows, what machines, what people are put in place, how much bigger it gets to fix these issues. And anyway, it's very ironic.
I'm going to point out two things with what you said, Cristy. One is that in every enterprise I've ever been involved in, the biggest cost is always the people, right? You're talking about machines. Machines are pennies out of this amount of money. It's the people that are verifying the signatures, that are running the primary elections that we wouldn't have had to run, that are doing all of the other things that the state has to do in order to make this stuff viable. That's going to be the big cost.
Yep.
All the extra work.
And then also in addition to the financial cost too, look at our policies and what's happened to our state, because we've had a Republican in the executive and in the legislature since 1992. We've been a fully Republican state, but we're moving so far left. And I would argue it's because we have this SB 54 that's allowing candidates in office who don't have to adhere to the platform. I think there's one justice that pointed out that said, if you do purely SB 54, there's nothing to keep a Bernie Sanders out from running as a Republican in Utah, because they don't have to follow the platform. So I think it's really costing us as a state. It's moving us further left with these candidates.
Yeah, but the thing is that, and I think this was brought up earlier, and I'm just going to put my finger on it and then let you guys talk about it. But it's not the left, it's not the left-leaning people that are the problem so much as it's the people who will do whatever the special interest is that will pay for the signatures and pay for the campaign so that they can win the primary that wind up getting in. And so we're not kowtowing to the left. We're kowtowing to special interests who want to go and put their thumb on the scale on a particular issue or area that's where we're getting into trouble. Right. And so then these people are working for them and not for us, the people.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, and that's exactly what, a Republican form of government was designed to address. It's not surprising that government, given, no oversight and no transparency, will get into mischief. And so we have a constitution, we have a Republican form of government. The governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. All of these things are not just arbitrary. They're not just words that, they didn't know what they're talking about, but if we apply it this way, it's like, no, they knew exactly what the propensity of, or the proclivity of government was, which was to get out of control if you don't keep it in control. And we've let it get out of control. And in Utah, we're doing it under the guise of disagree better and things like that. That it's like, this is not helping. This is not compassion to let our state be overrun by, illegal aliens and DEI and climate change policies and shutting down all of our, extractive industries, things like that. Is we're no one would ever get elected on that platform. Yet now they say, well, we don't really even have to get elected. We will be in power because we are the people. And that's Mike Lee, Senator Lee, posted on Twitter a few days ago. He said political parties and never the government should decide how parties will select their candidates. And that's, it's like so basic and so, just so basic that's got to be the case. And yet here we are, talking in Utah about should we let the legislature dictate to the Republican Party how they choose their candidate? And the answer should have been no, 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we know the names of forms of government that also control, where their government also controls their parties.
Yeah,
I was going to say, what countries can you name? Russia, China, that where the government is the party, is the government is the party, is the government is the party.
And here we are, right here in Utah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it got real quiet. That usually means that we've kind of talked through most of what we have to talk about. I guess the last thing is, let's say that we've talked through some of these issues and somebody's going, man, we're in trouble. What do you tell people? Do you tell them to go get involved in a specific place or join a particular group or just be aware of things? I mean, what advice do you have for Joe Nobody that lives across the street from me that is going, I don't even know how to start to help solve this problem?
Well, I'll jump in on that. I think it's one of the most exciting things to see what's happening in Utah right now. And we're seeing the kind of the clouds are lifting. People's eyes open up a little bit. And as soon as they see a little bit, then they open wide up. And that's a good thing. If we can deal in reality, even if it's an palatable reality, I'd much rather have reality. And the truth is, Utah is such a phenomenal state with natural resources, blessed by God with, the best, scenery and recreation and outdoor, everything. Utah has got so much going for it. And the people who are most upset with government are the ones who care the most about this state, not the ones who care the least. You don't criticize something you don't care about. You criticize something that is being slowly taken away from you. So someone the other day on a similar podcast said something about, how do you do this every day? Don't you just get so discouraged? And it's like, I'm excited about what's happening in Utah. I'm excited about the future, and whether it happens now or happens later, there are great things that are going to take place for the state. We've got an important role to play, and I believe that with all my heart. So I'm just glad to have the association. I will say that too, that through this whole campaign, I've just come across people who are honest patriots, love the state, and there's so many of them, so many people. My faith is with the people. It's not with the leadership of the House or the Senate or the executive branch. It really is with the people. So I guess that makes me a populist.
I was going to say it, but you said it.
How about you, Natalie? What do you tell people?
Oh, that's good. And I really like that quote that John Quincy Adams said, that duty is mine, results are God, or results are God's. And so I think that's how we all have our own duty to play in this, to make this state a better place for our children. We have a responsibility for our kids to make sure that they can grow up with our freedoms. We know that, like Ronald Reagan said, we're just one generation away from losing it all. And we see this coming in our state and how it's affecting us right now. So we can't sit back. We need to keep fighting. And the fact that we're having this conversation today is a big deal. And we need to just keep these conversations going and keep opening our eyes and opening other people's eyes to what's happening around us. And we can make some positive change here.
Yeah. Can I answer too?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I do. Join your LCCs right now, legislative collaboration committees. They are right now, they're forming in House districts. We've had probably half of our county meet with their or express interest, and they have them set up in the next couple of weeks, meeting with their right now their House reps, and some are starting with some of their senators as well. And for those who want to engage on that level, go through the legislative session, look at the policy, make some of these suggestions. There is nothing like, diving in, going through the process to, one, give you some compassion for what legislators go through as you see the process, and you also see that things are a little more complicated and not always so cut and dried or black and white as may first appear. And then also you see the flip side of that too, where you're like, oh my goodness, I'm finding stuff here and there. And, our mission has been to teach them to fish. This is their government. It is representative government. And so right now, LCC is getting in touch with your reps as they start to go into the next legislative session is huge. And Utah County, we hope we're giving the support to them so they can reach out to us. Your House chair, your House leadership, all those people can kind of help you. But solutions to these problems, you never know. I have found people, like Phil said, he loves the people. I found people that I have both overestimated and severely underestimated that have been real players and have come with solutions that have been fantastic or have found stuff that needs to be fixed. And so LCCs right now is where I'd say is a good place to start if this has been a subject that has opened your eyes. And we also appreciate them coming on. You guys are controversial. You are, you are. And we said a long time ago, Chuck and I said when we started this podcast, we weren't going to shy away from the controversial subjects. Last night, we walked out of executive committee meeting with a heated discussion on ranked choice voting that continued to go into the parking lot. And so we're glad that you've engaged with us. We hope that you appreciate our extending this invitation to have you come, and also the conversations that happened in our central committee meeting. I think we might have been the subject of one of the podcasts that were done with Mr. Clara. So we've been somewhat along for the ride. For the things we disagree, we hope we can either bring each other along, and then on the things that we agree, we're so grateful for how you guys have moved the needle on this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna be very brief, but if you want to get involved in the LCCs, like Cristy said, your best option is to go talk to your precinct chair or your House chair, and they can kind of help you figure it out. If you're having any trouble figuring out how to get in touch with the right people, just email me. It's vicechair@ucrp.org. UCRP is Utah County Republican Party, ucrp.org. I think we also have some information on the website. But that's where you get involved. And I also want to encourage you, even if you don't feel like you understand policy or, have answers or whatever, you do have opinions. You do understand where you want your life to go. And so even just that much, and chipping in where you can and kind of learning what you can from being involved in something like an LCC will be very, very helpful. And then the other thing I want to encourage you to do is just go talk to your neighbors about some of this stuff, right? You don't have to talk specifically about Phil and Natalie. You don't have to talk specifically about the elections, but just talk about the stuff you care about. Talk about the stuff that they care about. Have a conversation. And then for the things that you don't have answers to, go find out.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Question on the LCC. Did you say it's a legislative
collaboration committees?
Collaboration committee. Is that universal around the state, or is that most?
No, that's us.
It's us, but I know Davis, Summit, and Salt Lake County are looking at a similar version. Good. So we're pretty excited about them. The idea is it's these are your constituents. And if they follow you along, they've essentially put their faith and trust in you to do a job. And special interest voices get really loud during the legislative session, and it's probably the time that you hear the least from your constituents. And to no fault of the legislators, not to their fault at all. It's just the nature of the game. And so when we looked at this system, we thought, how can we keep that voice, even or at least equal to special interests? And so we've had awesome people step up, and they're very excited about it. We'll see. It's kind of a pilot program right now. So,
the other side of it, though, is that as we've talked to some of the legislators, it's like, well, do you read every bill, right? All 6 zillion of them that show up. And the answer is typically, well, there's no way. And so it helps them stay accountable to us, but it also helps us be accountable to them and help them get the work done, so that not just we get our way or whatever, or make sure that they understand where we're coming from. It's also so that we can help them be more effective, right?
It's a team.
So it's not a one-way accountability thing. It's, hey, we're collaborating, we're working together on this stuff, and and making sure that everything kind of works the way that it needs to so that we can get the best outcome.
Yeah, no, I love that. I will say, as a legislator, people would come up all the time. You get somebody that say, I'm a nobody, I'm just a mom, or I'm just, I'm a nobody, I'm just a citizen. And what they really should understand is, in the hierarchy of who you want to hear from, it really is the citizens. The lobbyists are always going to be there, and they're very valuable. They give you lots of good information, but what their game they're playing. Someone that shows up, and especially if it's a community group of people that just kind of spontaneously formed because they're concerned about an issue, that is really, really powerful at the legislature. So that I love the idea of those committees. And I will just say too, thank you for having us. Utah County's been great. The Bang the Drum event, all of the things that Utah County's done, they've really set the bar high for other counties. And I don't take it lightly that we're invited to come and talk on this prestigious program.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate that. And in Bang the Drum, we piggybacked off Salt Lake, but it was very successful this year. We're pretty excited about it.
I also want to just hit that. I know we're still recording. We'll just leave this in the podcast because I think it's important for people to hear it. Because you're saying the people that we want to hear from are just the moms, just the guy down the block. That's what we're here for too, right? I think a lot of times people get caught up in the party being about these grand things that are supposed to happen. And the reality is we're all in the same boat as just the moms, right? Where, and Christy and I were doing a presentation at our Elephant Society, which is, you pay monthly and you get to come to the dinners, and we're going to be talking about the vision. And I keep coming back to this idea of just the moms, right? Where it's, what do you want out of life, right? And for me, I want my kids to grow up and be successful. I want a society that they can prosper in, right? I want them to have freedoms. I want them to be able to pursue whatever they want, right? And I want those same things for me. I want to be able to pursue what I want. I want to be able to, build and run a business the way that I want. I want to be able to live in a society where I can associate with my neighbors the way I want, and where the values that I care about are the values that reflect in that society, or at least are not hampered by the government. Mm-hmm. And so that's what just the moms want, right? And so when it comes down to it, that's what we're fighting for, right? And so for the people that are thinking I'm just the mom, and so I can't get involved in the party because I'm not an expert in the thing, you've got exactly the wrong idea. You're exactly who we want to show up. And it's the same thing for the legislators, right? It's, how is this thing? Because like you said, the lobbyists are going to show up and they're going to say, this is how it affects the people that I represent, that I get paid to talk about. But the legislators want to know how it affects just the mom, and just the mom next door, and just the mom down the street, and all of the zillions of other just the moms that live in their areas. And so those are the people that we're actually fighting for.
Yeah. And I'm curious about these. What'd you say at the beginning? The party has this like glitz or glamour event thing. Where's that? When does that, Chuck? Where's that at?
Right.
Can I come?
Well, people have this idea that it's this big thing, it's a special thing. And it's a special thing because of who we're fighting for.
100%. And that's why when Phil said he wakes up and he's excited every day, I think this is the most exciting time ever to be alive, and to be in Utah. And I know people say, oh my gosh, it's really scary. A lot of the things that's happening in Utah, and they are right. And it's also super exciting to be able to be among people like this. We talk all the time, with people like just the moms who we associate with, and what a freaking cool time to see real acts of courage. Mm-hmm. Holy cow. Like, it's been awesome to see what you think is just everyday normal people step up and do things that you used to only read about in books. Mm-hmm. It's awesome.
Well, and I think in some ways people sort of expect the Trent Staggs and Phil Lymans to be kind of the big headline, go out and win it for us, or Donald Trump. I hear people, Donald Trump's going to solve all this stuff for us. But I am so convinced that is just going to be the regular run-of-the-mill people that stand up and are courageous in their own little way across the whole state and across the whole country that are going to make the difference. And so as much as we go out and we fight for the principles that we feel like, Donald Trump or whoever is going to go fight for us, the reality is I think we're going to be the ones that turn the tables. And then that may enable him to do some big things. But the way that we continue this momentum, and that's why I keep telling people, because they're like, on these big ticket offices, we didn't win in the primary or the general. Well, the reality is that we have made major headway and we have a lot of momentum. And if we keep doing what we're doing, we can eventually make those kinds of differences. But in the meantime, we can still help steer the ship toward the right thing. Yeah. And it's going to be the little people doing the big acts of courage in their lives.
Amen.
Yep.
I agree.
Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but I really feel that. And I feel like that's what we're in it for.
Yeah, I feel it too.
100%. Just remind, my family why I work so hard for free. My husband's up at our land, and are we casual now?
Yeah, I think so.
My husband's up in Idaho because he went to go get some of our motorcycles out of the shed. And he called me and he goes, "It's a good piece of land. It'd be really nice if there was a cabin on it." And I was like, I know, I haven't had a job for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all right. Because there won't even be the ability to put a cabin if we don't keep doing what we're doing.
That's right.
Right.
Do they make high density cabins? Is that a thing? Appreciate your guys' time.
Thank you. It's good to see you, Natalie.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Phil.